Welcome to On the Bubble Podcast, episode 75. I'm your host, Abasa J. Wade, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be doing a recap of the U.S. Nationals and calling in Minneapolis, as well as the battle hardened that occurred this weekend. And Yuki, you went down to Minneapolis too this weekend. How was your trip?
I had a good trip. It was a lot of fun. I got to see a lot of friends who were playing in U.S. Nationals, as well as just a bunch of the Canadians who traveled down and were playing the calling, just like me. I ended up taking Zen, and I took Zen to a 10-3 finish, coming in 18th at the calling. It was a pretty big calling. Often X3 will get you either top 8 or kind of like in the bubble territory, but yeah, I wasn't even close to bubbling. I think only 10-3 made it. My last loss was like round 10 or something, so I wasn't like super close to top 8, but still had a good run. Still cashed.
Okay, yeah, sounds like a pretty good run. Can we find your Zen deck list anywhere?
Yes. So actually kind of pumped out a whole bunch of content related to Zen, who, spoiler, ended up winning the calling. We'll talk more about that this episode. But I posted my Zen deck list on Patreon with a sideboard guide, matchup notes. There's also an article that goes into a tournament report for the weekend. And there's another article that talks kind of about just like how to play Zen, how to use his equipment, some of the common play patterns and lines that he has, what you should be prioritizing in the game, sort of like the overall strategy. So if you're somebody that's thinking of picking up Zen, or maybe you've played a little bit of it, but you're looking to refine your play, I think all of that is a great place to look. And that's on the Patreon for Titanium Bobble and Up patrons. So check that out over there.
Awesome, that's pretty sweet. I also know that Nia Tran, who top aided the calling, doesn't he also test with you? Does he have a similar list, or were you guys playing different lists altogether?
Yeah, he was also on Zen. Our lists were very similar. I think there was like a couple cards difference. I think essentially I played a couple extra blues, and he played Harmony of the Hunt red in that slot, and that was like I think pretty much the only difference. So yeah, virtually identical lists.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, even if you aren't subscribed and have like the Titanium Bauble membership, if you check out Nia Tran's list, I think it'll be pretty close to what Yuki played as well.
Yeah, I think it's just -2 Harmony of the Hunts. -2 red Harmony of the Hunts, and +1 Shifting Winds of the Mythic Beast, or whatever that card's called, and +1 blue 100 Winds. And I believe those are the only changes.
Amazing. What do you want to talk about first today?
So let's kind of I think this whole episode we're going to be talking about Classic Constructed, the meta going into Nationals, because we had US Nationals this time had its own weekend. There was no other Nationals, only US, and so there was a lot of spotlight on this event, and it's sort of the first big event that we've had since part the Mistvale. We've seen some like smaller battle hardens and stuff like that, but this is the first time we really get some good data and some good idea of what the meta looks like. So we'll break down kind of each of the events and talk about how they went. But before we do that, let's kind of talk about the expected meta game for Classic Constructed going into the event, because there was a bunch of decks that people were kind of talking about as maybe being good. And let's kind of set the stage there. So going into the weekend, a lot of people were talking about Zen and Azalea as possibly being like contenders for best deck. Zen did end up winning US Nationals. Azalea did end up winning the calling in a finals against a Zen. So that seems to be more or less on point. The other decks people were talking about were Kano, Prism, Enigma, and Brutes. Kano would go on to take down the Battle Hardened. Prism was present in multiple top eights, as was Enigma. And then there was the Brutes, who I think overall underperformed on the weekend. There was a KO that made finals of US Nationals, but all in all, it seemed like the Brutes didn't do all that well. They kind of underperformed. Some people were also talking about New, and I don't think New was in a top 8 of any of the events. So New also not really living up to the hype, at least on this weekend.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in our initial testings, New seems to be the most exciting hero at the release of Part the Mistvale. And then once we started like testing the hero and like actually playing some games with it, usually came down to that she's pretty close to usually on rate or under rate all the time. And that made her a little bit underwhelming just playing her. playing against better players or good players with news seems to be kind of miserable. Do you agree with that?
I think there's a bit of that going on. I think there's also like she has a perceived good Zen matchup. I'm still not entirely sure how good the Zen matchup is. I think it's decent. I think that if you have a really tech build, you really know what you're doing, you can be favored. One of my losses in the calling was to a new, and they did a really good job of arsenaling Dense Blue Mist and playing it off of Tunic every time I tried to do Bond's turns, and it made it really hard to get damage through. I also think I didn't play very well, so there is that. I made a lot of play mistakes day one of the calling, but that is what it is. And I think that the biggest problem that New has in this metagame is that even if you say that the Zen matchup is decently favored, I think Kano's kind of hard for you. You don't have enough pressure. Prism is really bad for you. Azalea is like not easy. Maybe a coin flip. Enigma is like winnable but tough and prone to going to time. I think your matchup into the brutes is okay, but like that's not great, right? Like I don't think she's like super well positioned overall right now is kind of her biggest issue.
I think New has a good matchup against the older metagame of like the Guardians, Brutes, Warriors. But in this new metagame, expected metagame of like Zen, Kano, Prism, Azalea, like she doesn't really have a good matchup against these players. I think that might change if New starts to tech in more cards like Warmonger's Diplomacies and ways to beat Kano and more poppers for Prism. And that might change how these matchups are played now that we know what the metagame is going to look like for the season.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think Assassin in general, and especially New, have a pretty wide card pool and a lot of ability to incorporate sort of these sideboard tech cards for certain matchups. But when the metagame is wide open, it's hard to know what to tech for. And I think the narrower metagame could be more favorable for New. I also think she's pretty hard to play. So there is that. So maybe we will see New do better in the future. But as we go through the results, I think you'll see that this weekend was pretty abysmal for New. So I think that if you are looking to play New, just make sure that you have a good reason for it and that you really feel confident in your game plans into the heroes. I think she feels like a hero that's like a fine choice. I think you could do a lot worse than New, but I also don't think she's like great. Like I think there's other decks that just have a better matchup spread overall.
Even me, I think I'm at around 120 games on Talishar on New or something like that. And I'm like still tweaking the deck and being like, not sure if this card is good or bad anymore. Yeah, this is the most amount of playtesting I've done with this hero now. And honestly, I'm going to the Battle Hardened in Tacoma this weekend and kind of excited to play New now.
Yeah. Yeah, we both have Battle Hard in Tacoma coming up this weekend, a weekend off, and then Canadian Nationals the week after that. I'm kind of undecided what I'm going to be playing at the Battle Hardened. I might just run back Zen. He was very strong. I might also try out another choice. I was thinking New or Kano. I keep running into this problem of like wanting to take New and then not having a deck list that I'm super happy with. And that kind of happened. Like I was thinking of playing New at the ProQuest Plus, and I was like, I don't really have a deck list that I want to play. So I played Zen instead.
You should try my list. You should try my list. That's sweet. My
Yeah,
list is sweet.
I've tried it a little bit. Maybe I'll try it more. I might try Kano though. I think Kano might be very very good.
The one copy Pummel is really sick in this deck.
Yeah, I've heard of a few people playing pummels. I know that there was also like a pummel. I think Michael Fung was playing a pummel Enigma list in the Battle Hardened and made top 8. So yeah, pummel good card right now. The meta is like kind of super aggressive with a lot of decks that don't really want to block and interact, and so disruption is at a premium.
Yeah, once you get to go surgical pummel somebody, oh, it feels so good.
That does sound pretty gross, especially since people never want to block against you because you have so many tricks.
I think before we move on, the one last question I wanted to ask you was, when did you find out Zen was gonna be like a powerful deck? Because like the set's only been out for like 2-3 weeks, right? Like, at what point did you guys figure out that Zen was gonna be like a top tier deck?
It was interesting. I think our testing group kind of missed Zen early on. Our initial assessments of the deck was that we weren't sure it was good enough. And then maybe even like a week or two before the set came out, Blue Pitch and the card guys did sort of like a show match on stream that's over on YouTube. And we saw Zen be pretty impressive. I think both teams had a Zen, but in particular, Pudding Tam's list, who top aided Worlds on Katsu, very well known ninja player, had a pretty cohesive Zen deck list. And I think that that was kind of like the groundwork for a lot of people. Following that, over the next couple of weeks, more and more people are talking about it. And I think leading up to nationals, especially once we got like a week or two out, most podcasts were starting to talk about Zen being really powerful. But there was also like the weird thing was that he wasn't showing up in like he wasn't doing well at the battle hardens and the smaller events leading up to nationals. So it was like, what's going on? Like, there's all this hype about Zen, but does he have problems? He has a bunch of no blocks. He can sometimes get disrupted. He has some kind of bricky hands. Like, there was a little bit of a question mark there, but a lot of people had high expectations for him, and we really kind of saw him deliver. So Zen's been kind of on my radar for the past like 3 weeks or so, I would say, and I think similar for a lot of various testing groups from what I've heard.
Then let's start talking about U.S. nationals first and the CC portions meta breakdown. And the number one deck that showed up to this event actually is Zen with 69 copies out of 474 players. The second most represented deck was KO and Azalea, both at 58. Then the fourth most represented deck is New. This is a deck that we just talked about a bunch, and like 57 players brought this deck to the US Nationals. It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, New pretty well represented, and yeah, we saw New be very popular, and I kind of thought that some of the hype around her might die down by the time we get to US Nationals, but a lot of people brought her anyways. A lot of good players brought her anyways too. And I think what we saw was, in terms of day two conversion, we saw KO, Zen, New, and Azalea kind of all on the top. So 27 KO, 27 Zen, 24 New, 24 Azalea, and then I guess 19 Enigma. Enigma did reasonably well as well. And then all of the others were smaller, but were also smaller representation. So like to begin with on day one. So those decks doing pretty okay overall. And yeah, like it was overall like a pretty diverse meta, right? Like I think Zen with 69 of 474 players made up about just under 15% of US nationals. So overall, like actually fairly diverse. Maybe not as diverse as like early heavy hitters format, but still like fairly wide open. The biggest difference I think between this and heavy hitters is there's a bunch of heroes who just like aren't really playable. Like we hardly see any Olympia, Teklo, Arachne, Viscerai, Dash.io, Rhinar, Vincent, Max, Phi, Uzuri, Kasai, Bolton, even Dash and Katsu. Like those are all 8 or less.
A lot of people decided to bring the Mistvale heroes this time instead. It's kind of surprising considering that the set's so new. People didn't default to like their old favorites. A lot of the people who did default seem to be on KO, but like heroes like Victor at 16. And the most surprising to me right here is that there's no existence of Bravo anywhere in the US Nationals. Do you know a reason why nobody brought Bravo?
I mean, just look at this metagame. I don't think Bravo's very good. Your Zen matchup might be decent, but and your Azalea matchup might be okay, but you're pretty bad into KO. You're quite bad into New. You're very bad into Enigma. You're bad into Kano. I think good Prisms will beat you. I don't think Levi is great for you. So like, what are you like? If that's the expected metagame that we talked about at the start, like, what are you good into? And furthermore, if you do want to play Guardian, why not play Victor, who got Visit the Goldmane Estate, which is a really really powerful card, and actually gives him some game into at least like Enigma and Kano and stuff like this, because he's able to be more aggressive and proactive, which is kind of what the format wants. The format is just really really fast because a lot of like Zen's so explosive that like any of the decks that can compete with Zen also need to be very fast. And I think that Bravo's just too slow and unfortunately just like much worse than Victor right now. And I think even Victor's not in a fantastic spot.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Is there any deck that stands out to you here in this meta breakdown right now?
Like in terms of being strong.
No, just like something that like surprised you or anything that like you want to talk about right now.
I don't think there was too many big surprises. It was honestly more or less exactly what I thought. There was maybe a little bit more KO than I expected. I'm not sure that KO is great right now, and I kind of expected more people to pivot off of KO, but I suppose this is really close to the release of the new set, and maybe there's a lot of people who are just like already on KO and decided I'm just going to practice draft and then bring KO, and he's like probably good enough, and I think that's like a reasonable approach. But yeah, there was more KO than I thought there would be, and even though he made the finals of U.S. Nationals, I don't know if it was like a fantastic weekend for KO overall.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Because these day two metagame breakdowns, three of those rounds were draft. So if there were strong drafters and like these new players and these KO players, that would bring up these numbers up for these heroes too, right?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, why don't we talk about the top 8 of US Nationals?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Right. So first off, congrats to the first place finisher Evan Herndon on Zen. Have you looked at his list so far?
Yeah, so shout out to Evan and that whole he tests with like the whole Toronto crew with like Tarek Patel, Michael Jaziker. I think like Simon Nielsen was testing with them for last PT. So it's that whole kind of group, Aaron Chance, Sean Dollywall, a lot of the Toronto grinders. Evan came in second at last US Nationals and won this US Nationals, so he's really been on a tear. Very, very strong player, really nice guy. And shout out to him for and that group for having some really cool tech. I think I'm not exactly sure whose idea it was. I think it was like partially Michael Jaziker, partially Jacob Bao. But they brought in some Zephyr Needle tech in Zen, and I didn't play this in the PTI event, but I heard about it and played one or two games in the hotel and brought it for the calling. And Zephyr Needles in Zen is kind of insane. The idea behind it is that it's just for the aggro matchup, so you still have the Tiger taming Kakura, but then you bring in Zephyr Needles against the aggro matchups because the games only last a few turns anyways. And if your opponent is sitting there and giving you like a 3 block on your weapon twice, like that's just giving you space to pop off and kill them. And it's kind of like you just did like a 3-for-1 go again twice with your weapons, which is nuts. And they're also giving you cards, which is like what you want because it just lets you race them more. And then if they don't do it, you just get like 2 resources for 4 damage, which is also nuts. So the Zephyr Needles was like really, really smart tech, and just I think it's going to be widely adopted. It's so powerful.
Okay, yeah, no, I didn't even think about Zephyr Needle and Zen until I heard about it this weekend, and yeah, this tech seems to be really powerful for the Zen matchup. And no, you're exactly right. Like, whenever a game goes super short, it kind of doesn't matter if you lose your weapons.
Yeah. I also think there's like something really funny about the game state of like because like Zen like kind of will often cash in his equipment to buy a pivot turn. Like you might block out a CNC, then you get the Tiger in hand, you get the Chi in hand, and then you just like have your massive pop off turn. But you just like wind up with this game state with Zen where you're just like, I have no equipments and no weapons. It's just my hero on the board. And it looks kind of amazing. It's very like minimalist. It's kind of beautiful.
No, yeah, he's the monk, right? So
Yeah,
he doesn't need
yeah,
anything to win.
yeah. Once he transcends, he leaves behind all his worldly possessions. It's like very flavorful, I suppose.
That's actually kind of sweet. That's actually kind of sweet.
but anyways, yeah. Big shout out to Evan. Really, really sweet list. That was kind of the most notable thing. They had a lot of Harmony of the Hunts, which have good synergy with Art of War. And they also had Shifting Winds of the Mythic Beast, which is something that not everybody was on. They talked me into playing one of this, and the card is pretty sweet when it's sweet. Basically, if you pitch a chi to it, you get 2 tigers in your hand, then you can name your tigers anything that you want. And the combo here, the most obvious combo here is you name Descendant Gustwave, and then you play a Bonds, and then you banish a Bonds, and you play a Descendant Gustwave, and then you play the Bonds that you banished, and you just get to do that like 3 or 4 times, which is kind of gross. So I think I had like a 36 damage turn with that didn't involve Art of War. And it was just like, yeah, okay, this blue block 3, pretty good.
Yeah, as a blue block 3, that sounds amazing, actually. I feel like the deck has like some issues like activating Descent and Gust Wave bonds sometimes, and man, just having more ways to do that sounds really disgusting.
I'm not entirely sure if you want the full 3 copies. I think it's arguable. It is still like a 1 cost starter, so it's like not the best starter, but the ceiling on the card is really, really high. And I think having a couple copies makes a lot of sense. Like I played 1 and I was considering going up to 2, and I could even see 3, honestly. Need to experiment more with it. But yeah, card pretty impressive and one to keep an eye out for. Other than that, I think like pretty standard. You have like the six bonds, six descendants at red and blue, and then you just play some good combo cards, playing like 30-ish blues, so a little higher on the blue count, which is actually what I ended up doing as well. I think I was on 27 for the ProQuest Plus, and then I went up to 29 because I drew 3 all red hands in the mirror, all red 1 costs, and that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. You don't win those games.
No, no, that's that's typically how you lose games as Zen, is you draw the 4 red hands, right?
Yeah, but then sometimes you draw the 4 blue hands and you're just like, oh, this is just 20 damage. So I was like, wait, why don't I just play more blues? And yeah, honestly, I was pretty happy with it at the calling. I think that a little bit higher blue count is more to my taste, but I know Nia did very well. Came in second at the calling, playing 27. So definitely some like exploration and a little bit of wiggle room there, and a little room for preferences, I think, as well, especially in your blue base. But yeah, Zen super super powerful, and Evan's list is a great one to look at. I would encourage people to check it out.
Okay, and one other question would be the second place list, the Andrew Rothermel KO Armed and Dangerous list. Was there anything notable in here, or have you looked at it yet?
You know, I haven't looked at it. Let's pull it up right now and take a quick look. My feelings going into the tournament was that I expected KO to be largely kind of solved, and most of the KO lists I played against didn't look too different. Checking out Andrew Rothermel's list, it very much looks like the kind of standard Wolfpack list with the red and yellow Bear Fangs, Clash of Mights, and then of course like some of the new cards. There's Savage Sash, Run Roughshod. Those are fantastic cards. And then it looks like in terms of disruption, he's teched in Weakest Link and Send Packing in addition to the usual Command and Conquers, which is kind of what I played against at the calling. I played against 3 KOs in the last 3 rounds, and they were all on similar setups. And I think the Weakest Links makes a lot of sense right now. It's a 2 for 6, which is kind of what you want anyways. And then Zen has a bunch of no blocks. So if you ever get the you draw a card, they discard a card, is really good. And even if you like make them play their transcend card and not transcend, and then they deny you the value, but like they still go -1 card, like a 2 for 6 that makes them get rid of one of the best cards in their deck from their hand is pretty good.
Yeah, I consider that a win.
Yeah, we take those. Like, even if you don't get the card draw, if you make them go -1 card, it's very solid. So I think if you're playing KO, you should definitely be playing Weakest Link. My big question is, I don't know if Weakest Link is enough into Zen. I think that clearly it worked for Andrew. I don't know how many Zens he played going into it, but he did very well, made it all the way to the finals. But in my games in the calling against KO, I was surprised at how comfortable I felt as Zen navigating that matchup. I think that he has a lot of tools, both in his equipment to block well, as well as his ability to play around Fleshbag, because the Zen activation is an instant. So I was finding I could just kind of like play out my turn, wait on the Zen activation as long as possible, and then if they flashback me, I can Zen and take like some kind of safe line that I still get most of my damage and just guarantee I have a reasonable arsenal. Or if they don't flashback me, I can just do my regular max damage line. It does take some like thinking about it, but I think that with some practice you can really kind of mitigate a lot of what Scowling Flashback can do. You also just have a million cards in your hand. Like sometimes you block with your boots and then you Zen and there's just like 2 tigers in your hand, and it's just like, I don't know, like it's just so hard for Fleshbag to be as impactful as you want it to be.
Yeah, that's fair. Something that I did notice from this deck list is that there's no tunic in the list anymore. Is that pretty standard now?
I think so. We kind of talked about the shift of the metagame from being from like the kind of mid-range long game value soup that we had at the end of last format to a kind of hyper aggressive, very, very fast, many games kind of lasting like 3 or 4 meaningful turns anyways. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, but you're kind of stuck in the blockout phase and it's like you don't have that many meaningful decisions. but yeah, with the games being so fast, I think it's hard for Tunic to be that valuable. And Savage Sash gives you the explosiveness, which is really, really what you want. I think that if KO's going to win, he needs to have a lot of damage plus disruption. So like if you can go 3 attacks wide and end on disruption and do that multiple times, I imagine that that's the games that KO is able to pull ahead against a deck like Zen. So I think Savage Sash only makes a lot of sense. Maybe if you were expecting more Guardian, you would want Tunic, but I don't know. KO's pretty good into Guardian anyways, and I don't know how represented Guardian was going to be going into the event. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Then, do you want to move on to talking about the calling next?
Yeah. So the calling is pretty interesting. We saw sort of similar Zen and New actually being the most represented decks. So 80 Zen and 74 New, followed by 58 Azalea, 43 Enigma, 40 KO, 32 Kano, 32 Victor, 31 Prism, 25 Levia, and 24 Riptide. And then pretty big drop off after that. Seeing Zen pop up so much is not too much of a surprise, especially after seeing him do pretty well day one of the Nationals. I was really shocked at how much new there was, and then I think the rest of it kind of makes sense and is kind of in line with Nationals. So biggest thing, the biggest outlier for me in terms of day one is just like that is a lot of new.
New is just really popular. I think it's because she's so fun to play.
I think so.
New has so many decision points, unlike all the other current heroes that you can play. And there's just like so many lines you can take. Not all of them is winning, obviously, but there's just like so many decision points for New that it makes playing Flesh and Blood kind of challenging again, and like not like the, oh, I'm gonna play my most efficient hand with Zen, or play 3 pumps and an arrow with Azalea game plan. And I think that's what like really draws a lot of people to New right now. But I still don't think New's that good, or she's very difficult to play, even if she is good.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that. New's the kind of the hero that I want to be playing right now, but I don't think power level wise she is quite there. And I think it's also worth noting that the calling in some ways is a better representation of the classic constructed metagame. You could maybe argue that like many of the strong players were in US Nationals, and that's true. However, the calling is also pure CC, whereas the Nationals was mixed format draft and CC. So you had 6 rounds of draft and 8 rounds of CC for Swiss, whereas the calling was just 13 rounds of CC. So I think if you're looking at CC metagame, the callings may be like a little bit more representative, but also it kind of mirrors the Nationals. So there's not like a huge discrepancy. So I think this is like a pretty good, I think we get a very good idea of what the metagame will be going into the rest of national season, and I'm curious to see if it will shift and people will be able to adapt and find a counter to Zen, or if he's just going to be kind of the best deck. My early impression is I don't think Zen's going anywhere. I think he's just that powerful. There's not really anything that is super good into him that is also reasonable into the field.
Yeah, that's fair. There are a lot of people looking for amnesias right now to try and stop like the bonds combo portion of the deck, or the names mattering portion of the deck, but not sure if that's good enough. Even like just the 3 more copies of amnesia into Zen might give you just enough edge to like have a good game against it, but you still might be unfavored in the matchup.
Yeah, my feeling is like there's decks that can maybe get close to 50% into Zen, but like it's like one of those like if you play Zen, you have a 50% into Zen. So like why play another deck and tech a whole bunch of cards just so you can be 50% into Zen and then have like likely a worse matchup spread overall. I realize we're not talking about all the heroes and that's like maybe a bit reductive, but that's sort of my current read on the format is I think that Zen has one of the strongest claims to being best deck. And the other deck I'm really high on is Kano. And maybe we can kind of talk about more of the calling data to kind of talk about why I think Kano might be the real deal. So going into day 2, we see 15 Zen, 9 Enigma, 9 KO, 8 Kano, 7 New, 7 Prism, 4 Azalea. Zen did very well, had about a 19% conversion rate. So very, very solid, maintaining. He actually like went up proportionally. He's about 20% of day two, whereas I think he was around 15% of day one. So his proportion of day two is higher than his proportion of day one. Enigma KO did okay. Kano's conversion was crazy. We had 32 copies of Kano in day one and then 8 copies in day two. So almost a quarter of all the Kanos day two, which is nuts. New, pretty bad conversion. 74 news. We see 7 in day two. That's like less than 10% conversion rate. I think it was around 9.5% for new. So new really underperforming. And then most of the other decks like Enigma, KO, Prism, all kind of doing respectably.
So I think an outlier to me right here would be the Azalea. What what happened with Azalea? I thought we were talking how Azalea was like pretty strong and like reasonable in this meta game. But when we see this calling day one, day two breakdown, there was 58 Azalea day one and all the way down to 4 Azalea in day two. So that's less than a 10% conversion. It's actually almost worse. That is actually worse than new. What do you think is going on here?
That is interesting. I'm not totally sure. I thought Azalea was a little bit stronger than this, but I wonder if I think that the Kano matchup might be now that Kano has Kindle might not be as good as you want it to be. And I also think that the more that I play the Zen matchup, the more that I'm not I thought it was like very coin flippy and close, but the more that I play it, the more that I feel like Zen might just actually be a little favored. Warmongers is a hell of a card, and when you get to do the Azalea thing of going red in the ledger for 14 every single turn of the game, yeah, you win those. But often all it takes is one stumble and you can really kind of get buried. So I wonder, I'm curious like what the actual matchup data is from this event. If I know sometimes we get that someone like grinds all of that out. I don't know if there's like a sheet for that, but I'd be curious to see what her win rate is into Zen.
Is it it's actually kind of interesting because like in recent days warmonger diplomacy like spiked up in price again. I think they're closer to like 50 US dollars each now, and a lot of these top decks, Enigma, Zen, even some news are playing warmonger's diplomacy right now to counter the rangers like Azalea and Riptide. Do you think that's gonna be like a big issue for Azalea when more of these decks just gets to play warmongers for, very little cost? Like Zen just gets to play it because he's a ninja, and Enigma gets to play it because it's a blue card. So these like top decks having access to warmongers pretty freely in their deck. Do you think that's like a big factor in why Azalea is struggling right now?
Yeah, I mean that definitely hurts the deck a lot. Notably, it does end up winning the calling. So I think that Azalea is there power level wise. I think that I believe Brody was also 10-3 on Azaleas for like a top 16 finish or something like that. So there were Azaleas that did well, but yeah, I think that maybe the deck being so on people's radar and everybody bringing warmongers kind of hurt its ability to do well. Because yeah, but not so much either, right? Like we did see Azalea in top 8 of both events, so I think Azalea like a fine choice for the event, but maybe not as powerful as didn't do as well this weekend as Zen for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then do you want to talk about the winning list for the calling? This is congrats to William Pistel on Azalea, actually, as we talk about it, winning the calling, being one of the 4 people to day two the calling with it.
Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff in this list. A lot of it is pretty standard, so kind of borrowing from Brody's recent lists, which have like amplifying arrow, codex of blood rot, very low blue count, mostly yellows and reds, playing a very large number of pumps. I don't know exactly how he was sideboarding, but I believe that those lists were often kind of sideboarded as like 27 pumps, 27 arrows, roughly. And this list looks like it might be set up the same way. The biggest innovations I see here is Battering Bolt, which is pretty nice tech, I think. Battering Bolt reads so this is an old card from Everfist. It's a 2 for 6 arrow that reads when Battering Bolt hits a hero, they reveal their hand and discard all cards other than action cards. And then they lose 1 for each card discarded this way. So with all the Transcend instants and Chi running around, Battering Bolt will actually rip all of those cards from someone's hand if it hits, and then they lose a life for each of them. So I think in addition to being a popper into Prism. So I think that battering bolt is like a really smart call and makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and it also kills for the news, kills Justin Nick, Hiss, Venomous Bites. Kind of very annoying once it gets Dominate.
Yeah, yeah. In particular with Dominate, it seems very, very powerful. So that was like a very smart piece of tech, I thought. And then there's Battlefront Bastion. I imagine this is just for Prism. They're playing the red one as a 7 power popper. But notably, if you pop with this, you defend. It defends on its own, and you get the prevent one going to the next herald. So you get a popper that also blocks one on the next herald, which is kind of insane and means that if they go like red herald into red herald, you actually have the option of like blocking out that second herald if you really wanted to, or just like saving a life, which is still very nice. So Battlefront Bastion, pretty nice popper. I've seen a lot of people turning to Blanche as a popper because you can play it on offense, but in Azalea, like this deck has 5 blues. You're not casting this card, I don't think. Or any of the 3 costs really. So I think Battlefront Bastion makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think a card I do want to talk about right now is Codex of Bloodrot. I haven't really seen this card in Azalea before. I know you mentioned Brody started to play with it, but what is this card for, and like, what does it do really, and like, what does that card actually do?
So Codex of Bloodrot, 0 cost, 2 block, non-attack action, assassin ranger action. Each hero puts a card from their hand face down into their arsenal. Then you create a ponder token under your control and a Bloodrot Pox token under each opponent's control. Go again. So just on his face, it's pretty good math. You get to give them a Bloodrot, which is 2 damage, and then you draw a card for your next turn. So this is sort of like 2 damage, draw a card, which you could put at like roughly a 0 to 5, and it's a yellow. So Codex of Bloodrot just like super super efficient. Um, However, if you double up on ponders, it does lose some of its value, and I imagine that's why it is a 2 of. Another thing that Codex of Bloodrot does is by forcing them to put a card from their hand into their arsenal, it means that that card gets debuffed by frailties, and also notably, they can't block with that card. So sometimes you can kind of put them in like awkward spots where they can't block as efficiently as they want to. Additionally, the Bloodrot tokens are quite good against Enigma, who the Bloodrot will deal damage at the end of the turn, and then she has to pay for it, or it will eat her ward. So has some applications there, in addition to the Murkmire Grapnels, which he's teched in, and I think most Azaleas probably were on for this metagame for Enigma.
I see. So this card's like a very easy include because Enigma is like a large portion of the meta game, and this card's really good into Enigma as well.
Yeah, I think it gets extra points into Enigma, but I think my impression of it is that people just think it's like a pretty good card overall. It does give you some like awkward hands, but it can let you do some cool stuff. The placing another card in Arsenal can be beneficial for you as well, because like you might do like Bolt and Shot, then you can use Codex of Bloodrot almost as like another Bullseye Bracers type effect to fire another arrow. So it also has application there. So I think that the card just like does enough that it's just like a pretty good card in Azalea. I'd imagine that this is getting played maybe not in every matchup, but in quite a few of them. But yes, it does have extra points into Enigma.
And we already talked a little bit about Zen already. Second place, Nia Tran. Congrats to you. And thanks for lending us your room next week as well for Canadian Nationals.
Yeah, we'll be sharing a room with Nia, or he'll be letting us stay with him. So thank you, Nia. We love you. Yeah, Nia, great guy. Really happy to see him do so well. Teammate of mine, someone I test with as well. So, and good friend of mine. So yeah, really amazing weekend from him. And I think if there's another story about this top 8, there's a couple things. First, I need to shout out Oliver Fee. We've had him on the podcast, also a teammate and friend. So we had double Stroop top 8. Stroop Waffles, the team that I test with. So very happy for my teammates this weekend. Other things I want to mention: we saw a Dash in top 8, which is like kind of not on anyone's radar, but she got there. I don't know if she's great, but I think she's like pretty okay, pretty solid Kano matchup. Can maybe race Zen sometimes. She's like, I feel like Dash has been in the spot for a while where she's like not good, but she's fine, and like maybe she can win an event. She's like still pretty okay, and I think she's like still kind of in that spot. She can just like kind of high roll and do really good stuff sometimes.
This is like classic boost dash with the new upgrade of people playing Teklo base arms with the evil steel soul controllers. I'm kind of not sure like what matchups you want to play this into, but people are doing it, and I'm not exactly sure what the dashes are thinking, but this deck's doing good.
Yeah, I can comment on it a little bit. You theoretically have an okay Zen matchup because of like T-Bone Magnetic taking Zen's equipment early can be very, very detrimental for him. A lot of his powers kind of tied up in his equipment, and if you just like open the game and blow that up before he's transcended, that's very, very bad for him. So you have the ability to kind of like high roll Zens, and then I think that Dash might be, or at least I don't know if it's still the case with Kindle, but traditionally Boost Dash in anyways is like one of Kano's worst matchups, like maybe his worst matchup in all of Fab. Actually, no, Prism's his worst matchup in all of Fab, but after Prism, it's I believe it's Dash. So I think that's like maybe another reason to be bringing the deck.
And I guess the last thing to talk about in this calling would be 3 copies of Kano in this top 8. That's a lot of Kanos.
3 copies of Kano in top 8. We see Julian make semis. Very well known Kano player, been playing Kano for a very long time. 3 Kanos in top 8 is kind of scary. There was 32 Kanos day 1. 3 of them made top 8. That's like almost 10% of the people who brought Kano made top 8. This is a 530 player event. That's messed up. That's messed up.
This is too many Kanos for my liking. My current new deck is not tech for Kano. I kind of have to race it with like pummels, but if they just like have one good hand, I kind of blow up. So
Yeah.
this deck's kind of gross.
Yeah, and especially with Kindle, the ceiling on this deck is just like Kano's ceiling is always high, but with like the way the decks are being built with Kindle and Cindering Foresight, man, this deck can do some really wild stuff. I've been like goldfishing it a little bit just today, and I'm like, holy, this deck is like, I don't know, it just kills you. It just kills you out of nowhere. You can have so much life, and it's just like, nope, you explode.
Can I tell a quick story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'm playing on Talishar against the Kano with my new deck. At this point, I'm at 54 life, and Kano's at like 14 or something. I'm like, oh, this game's doing great. And then he he activates Kano one of the turns I like attack with a disruption and banishes Tome of Aetherwind. And then he decides to just go off and pop off and just pitch the rest of his blues in his hand and banish like 2 other cards, activate Ragamuffin's Hat. And I didn't know about this card that you could play Tome of Aetherwind in response to Ragamuffin's Hat, draw 2 cards, then choose the card to put on top after looking at all 3 cards. I did not know this was an interaction.
You can also, oh my god, it's so funny that you bring this up. You can also Kindle to draw cards. We were having dinner with Peter and Majin Bay after on the Sunday, and Peter was very excitedly telling us about the like you draw 4 cards and Ragamuffins because Ragamuffins only cares when you activate it. That you have 1 card in hand, but if you activate it and then in response tome, I guess response you Kindle then tome. Yeah, you Kindle then tome. I guess you Ragamuffins, you clear the card in your hand with like if it's Kindle, you can just play it, or you can do something else. You can like pitch it and then play a Kindle from Arsenal. You draw off the Kindle, you draw off the tome, then you draw off the Ragamuffins. You have 4 cards in your hand, then you choose which one you Ragamuffins.
Yes. It's Ragamuffins Hat when it first got printed. We're just like, how is this card ever playable? And then now I'm looking at this card, I'm just like, how is this card even fair?
I've heard stories of like wildfire for 8 and just like killing people through AB3 and without using striders on like turn 2. Yeah, deck kind of good.
Please ban Aether Wildfire.
So I don't think you can ban Aether Wildfire. It really cuts the legs out from under him. But yeah, Kano is a scary, scary, scary deck. Kano is a deck that scares me. I think in the past, like, I was kind of like, yeah, you can tech for Kano and beat him. But I think that with Kindle and the way decks are being built, he's just so explosive that he's pretty spooky. I'm curious to see how Kano's going to do the rest of the season. I think my big takeaways from this weekend is, first of all, Zen is nuts. And I think that's what most people took away. But second of all, Kano is also nuts. And Kano might be, I think Kano and Zen are like the two contenders for top deck at the moment, at least in my eyes.
You know what? That's super fair. And I think I agree with you. Those are the two decks that every time I queue into, I'm just like, how do I beat this deck?
Yeah, because they can just kill you. They can just kill you out of nowhere. Maybe to wrap up this episode, we can also mention the battle hardened. So battle hardened, we see Zen, 50 Zen, 40 new, 37 Azalea, 32 Enigma, 27 KO, then 16 of Levia, Prism, Kano, Victor. So similar breakdown to what we've been seeing. Top 8 is 5 Zen, 1 Enigma, 1 Kano, 1 Prism, and Kano won the battle hardened. So yeah, I think Kano very good.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think one shout out I do have to give is there is this one person on Arachne in this battle harden, and there was one person on Arachne at the calling, and there's this like in the meta breakdown that the stream gave us on the very bottom right hand corner on the day one metagame breakdown for the calling, it says +1 Arachne on it. And whoever did that nice little touch, shout out to you because that's a very beautiful touch to have that. Not even the picture of Arachne on the day one meta game breakdown.
Yeah, that is pretty funny.
But you know what? Props to you for bringing Arachne for all these events.
Yeah, some people are dedicated. They know what they want to play.
Yeah. Anything you want to talk about the top 8 for the Battle Hardened though? I see a couple of notable names like Charles Dunn and Michael Fang on the top 8 here.
Yeah, I didn't have a whole lot to say about it. Zen real good, Kano real good. A lot of strong players in the top 8 of that battle harden. No surprise. I did like Michael's Enigma list. It looked pretty interesting. It's just like he's like playing Guardian, but it's Enigma.
Michael Fang style.
Yeah, it is very Michael Fang style. List is kind of sweet. It plays Pummel. It has like CNC Pummel, Weakest Link Pummel. It's playing like Enigma Chimeras, Phantasmaclasm, and just like, just like you hit people with big numbers and disruption, and that's what you do. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that list was pretty interesting. I messaged him about it, and he told me he doesn't know how good it is, but it's fun. So
Playing a fun deck for the battle hardened seems great, and then top aiding anyways. Good job, amazing.
yeah, yeah. Michael is a very sick flesh and blood player. Surprise to no one.
Yeah, that's this deck is pretty sweet. It plays Amulet of Echoes in the as the blue pitch, as well as Spectral Prowler. These two cards I haven't even seen before yet, but Amulet of Echoes is kind of sweet. It's a generic action item, 0 cost at blue, and has go again, and it has instant destroy Amulet of Echoes. Target hero discards 2 card. Activate only if they play 2 or more cards with the same name this turn. Is this the Zen tech? So they play like multiple crouching tigers. They lose their hand.
It has to be. It has to be for Zen. My big question is like if the card is good enough, it's still a blue 0 block and it's on the board, so they have the ability to play around it. I haven't actually tested into this card. It's something I've been meaning to test into. I probably will for nationals. But yeah, my big question is does Amulet of Echoes do enough, or can they just sequence their turns so that they don't double up on the same name until like most of their cards are gone?
Honestly, though, but that might just give us enough time to play around Zen. Like you just need to slow them down 1 or 2 turns sometimes, and if that means that they don't get to descendant you, maybe that's good enough.
Well, all I mean is like I wonder if they can just go like Descendant Bonds, play all their other stuff, then go Descendant Bonds like once their hand's empty and just like
Oh, okay. So you're saying like maybe it doesn't even affect their turn.
I'm not sure. It's like one of my this card is like on my radar as a card to test and try out. The devs also talked about that they were playing this card in this metagame for Zen. So it's interesting. Yeah, very curious to know how Amulet of Echoes performs into Zen. His lines are pretty fluid, but yeah, maybe if you just like make things awkward, make him lose a little bit of value just by having it on the board is worth it. I honestly, what I probably need to do is just like Goldfish Zen and imagine there's an Amulet of Echoes on the board and see like how much it changes the damage of like, here's how much I would have done. There's an Amulet of Echoes. Here's how much I can do instead, and then figure out if that's worth it.
Yeah, you know what? That's fair. That's fair. Let me know if Amulet of Echoes actually disrupts Zen, because then I'll play that for Canadian Nationals to beat Zens.
Oh, but then if I'm bringing Zen, maybe the play is to tell you, oh yeah, Amulet of Echoes very, very good if it doesn't do anything. And then if Amulet of Echoes is really good and I don't want to play against it, no, 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 card's no good. Don't play Amulet of Echoes, Jay.
That's too big. That's too big, Raid. I don't think you'll do it. So, look, you can beat me without doing that stuff. So you'll tell me, so then you can help me try and top 8 this event.
Mm, true, true.
Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up the episode?
I don't think I have too much else. Yeah, pretty curious to see how the rest of Nationals goes, if anything else will develop. But right now, I think you should be playing Needle Zen or Kano. Or maybe like Prism Azalea. There's like a couple other choices that are also like okay. But Needle Zen and Kano seem really good.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Okay.
Yeah, so thanks for listening. You can reach out to us on social media. I'm at Yukili Bender on Twitter, and Jay is at Ueda J over on Twitter as well. We also have an email at onthebobble@gmail.com, and you can message us directly there if you have any questions or feedback. But yeah, best of luck to all of you at your nationals. I hope it goes well, and until next time, I hope you have a good night.
Honestly, you know what's pretty sweet? The new set, Rosetta.
Yeah, world
Yeah.
premiere Tampa Bay. I think I'm gonna try and go. New set
Uh,
looks really cool.
yeah. I guess I should too. I will figure out how I'll figure out if I can scrap together enough money to go. Oh, why is there so many events for this game?
Yeah, there really are so many events. Honestly, it's pretty good. It's really sweet. I'm
No,
happy that there are, but there are so many.
it's such a great thing, and it's such a good problem to have. And I know it's a first world problem that it's just like, man, I want to go to all of these events, but I can't go to all of these events. But man, all of these events are they seem so fun to go to. Most of the world premiere events, like, first time being able to touch the cards and being a sealed calling, essentially. Oh, please, it's like the dreams. These are all dream scenario. Just need to find
Yeah.
the money.
hmm They also
uh,
said they were gonna hold back on some of the majestics or like some of the higher rarity cards. They weren't gonna spoil and wait for the world premiere, which should make it like, I don't know, even more hype.
oh, honestly, that sounds great. Like, I want to know what the commons and the rares do, because like I want to know for the preparing for the calling. But
hmm
honestly, like some of the majestics and like the expansion stock cards, I kind of wish they don't spoil it, because like imagine just like opening like a sick random M for like, I don't know, dash like that. I would be so happy if they just like printed another like 2 cost item that was like good at fatiguing people. I would be so happy. And if that was like a complete surprise.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think it'd be pretty exciting to open brand new cards.
Man, do you know a card that I would really want in Dash? It's like a legendary Dash item that just like flipped it up and both players lost an intellect. Oh, that would be so sick.
It sounds so miserable. Please don't do that.
Look. Both at 3 hand size? That seems like a better gameplay to me.
Mm, don't I
Okay,
don't like.
I'm done trolling now.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, honestly, I think this is a pretty sweet change. I hope that they keep this. I feel like with the internet, I'm gonna sound old, but I feel like with the internet, you just like don't get to. It's like hard to get to do things and like not know anything about it because you just like it's just like information so readily available. So just to be able to like open a booster pack and be like, wow, I didn't know this card exists is like kind of a novel and yeah, kind of a novel experience that like I haven't had since I was a kid. So kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think one last thing I want to say is the July Armory kit that got announced. Oh man, the new playmat and the beckoning Mistblade cold foils. Oh, these look beautiful. I want these.
Yeah. Yeah, I want them as well. Sounds very, very sweet.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to say for today.
All right.
Right, and good night, everyone.
Good night.